Okay, thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our interpretation services, is she back where she needs to be able to do the interpretation for people? Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Fritz, can I have the roll call, please?
Yes, Trustee Phillips.
Present.
Trustee Christian.
Present.
Present and accounted for.
Thank you, sir. So next we're going to go to approval of the agenda. Mr. Christian, is there anything that you need to or want to? Do you have any comments on the agenda?
No, I don't.
Okay. We are going to, there is no consent item on here, so there's not any vote. So we're just gonna, by consensus, move forward with the, I do have one, Mr. Christian. So the minutes that are on here, I need to table the minutes because I didn't have a chance to actually review them. So I need us to come back to that. But other than that, I'm fine too, and then we can move forward. We're gonna go to item B1, and I don't hope this is not a long meeting, but we're gonna go to item B1, which is public comment. Before we begin public comment, this is public comment on items that are not on this agenda, that are under the facilities program. If you have a comment on an item that's on this agenda, then please wait until that item comes up. I just want to know, I do see a trustee with her hand up. We will not be calling on that trustee because that will make us have a quorum of the board and violate the Brown Act. So I just want that person to know that they're not being ignored, but that legally they cannot participate in this meeting. So that said, the people that we do have, can you please start public comment for them?
Sally DeWitt.
Okay. I do have a comment on an item that's on the agenda. However, I have to teach a class at 4 o'clock and I must leave by 3:45. So I ask your forbearance and that I can speak now. It's about 1 minute and 40 seconds.
I'm sorry, because we need to stay with what our rules are. So maybe someone else could say what you need to say later on. But right now, this is general public comment, not on items. Is there any other comment?
There's no other public comment.
Okay, so the next thing is item C1, which is Citizens Bond Oversight Committee application.
Yes, this afternoon we're bringing forward the application for a senior citizen position, and it's Mr. Panis. And if we could bring Mr. Panis up and bring up the questions.
Tom, you are now a panelist.
All right, terrific. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'll go ahead and read the questions as you see them here before you. The first question is, please provide a quick summary of why you chose to apply for the West Contra Costa Citizens Bond Oversight Committee.
So thank you, President Phillips, trustees, and trustee
Christian and district staff. I feel the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee is a very important function of the committee. We have a huge construction program, and I think good citizen oversight of that construction is very important. It's required by Ed Code. It's been required by all the bond measures that we passed by 55% as opposed to 2/3 majority. And I was a very successful and active member of the CBOC before I went on the school board, and I would like to resume that role.
Okay, terrific, thank you. For question number 2, can you briefly outline what in your professional background, work experience, education, or volunteer work would be relevant to the committee and highlight any special or unique qualifications or qualities you feel would contribute to the committee?
Thank you. So I have an extensive background in finance. I was certified as a CPA in 1980. I have worked in finance, a combination of finance and technology since 1977. And so I am very, very interested in district finance and technology in particular. In my years on the CBOC as well as on the school board, I certainly became very familiar with the district's construction program. And even before I got on the CBOC, I was following the district's construction program very carefully. I am involved in a number of local organizations, from the Richmond Emergency Food Pantry to the Elsevier Library Foundation to the Latina Center, Community Garden. I enjoy public service very much, and I think all these items bring me a large network of people, and they also indicate my desire to be serving the community.
Question number 3, the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee meets monthly and has several subcommittees. Is there any particular subcommittee that you would be interested in serving on?
I'm particularly interested in the audit and in the site visit subcommittee. Terrific. I served on the audit committee, both those committees before. I also worked with the annual report committee, and I'm happy to do that as well. Or any other committee that the chairman would ask me to participate in.
Terrific. The final question is, have you attended any CBOC meetings? If so, what observations might you share? Are you aware of any issues that the committee addressed recently?
Thank you. So I probably have missed 5 CBOC committee meetings in the last 7 or 8 years. As I said before, I consider this to be a vitally important function that's required by the state, has been examined by the grand jury, and I want to make sure that our district is in compliance with all those things. CBOC meetings over the past 8 years have evolved from, in a sense, a very rough and tumble world to still a very analyzing and scrutinizing group of people, but in a much more orderly fashion. And I think that's really benefited the district, that the CBOC has continued to be inquisitive and full of questions and wanting to make sure that its opinions are heard. Of course, it's the board's decision to decide, but I think that is a very strong benefit. That's really my key observation regarding the CBOC, and that they have been I think they've been out there trying very hard not to, I'll just say, be proactive about things that haven't happened yet, but at the same time be very careful about examining things that have happened, which is the role of the CBOC, as well as in the past 6 or 7 years, I think there's been a fantastic participation by the CBOC in the selection of not the district financial statement auditors, but the auditors who do the bond performance audits as well as the bond financial audits. And, you know, the committee has been really bound up in the last few months about changes to the CBOC bylaws that on face value seem to be in violation of Ed Code, as well as the resolutions that the district has passed regarding bonds. And also, CBOC has addressed the issue of the district not honoring the board's resolution regarding citizens bond oversight with our new bond measure we passed last year.
Terrific. Well, thank you. That concludes the questions for today.
Mr. Christian, do you have any questions? You don't have to. I'm just asking you if you do.
No.
Okay. I don't have any questions either. Is there any public comment on this item? One hand has gone up.
They went up and then went back down, so I'm not sure what that means. Oh, we got the hand, one hand's come up.
Okay. Please start public comment for that person.
Want to talk? Ms. Holmes? You should be able to unmute.
Thank you. I apologize. I have a terrible time with this. I'm a member of the CBOC, and I would just like to recommend this applicant. I think his background is excellent, and what he adds to the committee is he knows both sides of the picture. He knows the bond program from the CBOC side and from the board side. So he knows what limitations the board has and what limitations the CBOC should have. Also, we have lost 2 members that have a lot of historical knowledge of the workings of the committee and the history of the history of the committee and the board. And I think that Tom could add to that loss. Thank you.
That concludes public comment.
Thank you very much. We're at the board discussion point of this. My question is there a motion to recommend Tom Panis to the full board to serve on the CBOC?
Oh, that's on me?
No, it's only us. If you have a motion, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. I'm just asking as like a protocol, but you don't have to do anything. Okay. There does not appear to be a motion to recommend Tom Panis to the full board to serve on the CBOC. So we will be moving to the next item, which is C2. Measure R 2020 prioritization list. Presenter, Mr. Priest. Thank you.
And this afternoon, Mrs. Mejia Hooper will work us through the presentation.
Let me share my screen here. Right, great afternoon. Thank you for having us today. We're going to go through updating the facility master plan for prioritization of project sequencing for the measure R. I was trying to, it doesn't want to get smaller. Adopting criteria, metrics, and weighting. So at our previous board meeting on the 2nd, the board approved the criteria, metrics, and weight for each one of the for the prioritization list. This has now been applied to the individual school sites. And as we were applying it, we just wanted to make clear which of the metrics were from 2016 and did not change. So functionality score and physical condition are the same as the scores that were in the 2016 report for each of these school sites. The green represents criteria that was the same as a 2016 criteria, but was updated since then. So the seismic needs as listed here was updated for the critical needs projects. The age of school was updated for the one school that we demolished the main building. And we updated the unduplicated count. At the board passage, we had the 1920 data. Now we have the 2021 data. So the 2021 data was used just because it was the most up-to-date version that we had on record. The blue criteria is new criteria that was introduced this time around, which was a reflection of 2020. It had a lot to do, at least the second two have to do both with mental health as well as ventilation, and then we have the restroom sink component. So these are the criteria that were passed and were used. Each of these metrics had to be converted into a 10-point scale so that we can compare apples to apples. So this chart basically breaks down how the 10 points were assigned for each type of metric with the type of data that was available within that metric. This led to the draft updated priority school list. This chart represents the different points that each school received for each one of the metrics. You can see here that some of them are larger than the 10 points, and that's because each of the criteria had a weight. So if it had a weight of 2, it was multiplied, whatever points it had was multiplied by 2. If it had a weight of 3, it was multiplied by 3. So for functional weight, for example, weighted score, that means for the function score, it had up to 20 possible points. For seismic, there was up to 30 possible points. And so that's how the data was applied and the chart was created. The school scoring the most points was Steege, followed by Kennedy, Richmond, Highland, Cameron, and so on. There is a difference here because Cameron, Alvarado, and Sarah previously were excluded from the main list because we had 3 different criteria that did not apply to non-comprehensive school sites. This time we only had 1 criteria that was not applied to, that wasn't equally applied. However, we had similar data. So that 1 criteria was the Lcap, or metric was the Lcap component of the unduplicated count of low-income foster youth and English learners. However, the Alvarado program keeps the number of students that are low-income or speak another language, English language learners. Cameron is our preschool special education program. So it has the students that are identified for special education as toddlers. So this is a very high needs group. So we awarded all of the points to them. And then Sarah is currently being operated, or is currently being operated in the summer school program as Mandarin. So that Lcap number was applied to Sarah. So that's how they ended up integrated into the single chart. Statewide, and so now we're going to switch over to Mr. Wold, who will describe other things that are happening around the state.
So as we're working through the facilities master plan and we get the prioritization, there continues to be change that impacts what we need to use our facilities for and what needs to be prioritized. In particular, there is projected to be the biggest influx of investment in early education that this state has ever seen, with increases in the number of seats for preschool, as well as a full phasing in of transitional kindergarten as a 14th grade being offered in the K-12 continuum. This will require every school district in California to take a strong look at the number of facilities that are utilized at every single elementary school for these special needs populations. When you have a kindergarten classroom, there is ed code that requires different bathrooms and full square footage. There's also for preschools, very specific regulations as it pertains to play structures and play areas. And so part of our work as we move forward will be to take a look at each and every school to look at their capacity to indeed increase the number of early education classes on the campus as students that are ages 3 and 4 become eligible to be at the K-12 public schools. And when schools were designed, there wasn't a plan for this. The traditional design for an elementary school creates a kindergarten building. Often it has 2, or in large schools, 4 classrooms. The idea was that there would be AM and PM, so you could have double the students served in those classrooms with full day kindergarten, full day transitional kindergarten, full day preschool. You could have a need for a school that normally only has 2 classes, need 4 or 5 classrooms almost immediately overnight. The state recognizes this, and in 2022, there is the intention for the state to put a statewide facilities bond for facilities matching on the ballot, as well as a specific facilities bond just for early education. The district, with Measure R beginning, is posed very well to be able to access significant matching funds to expand our ability to work on multiple sites. However, we have to do the analysis of demographics, all the different possible pieces, and that may require us to take a deeper look at our prioritization as we go in the next year. We've already made sure that the lake design that was already board approved and moving forward will incorporate these new expectations of having classrooms available for early education. So as we start talking about prioritization, we'll be making a recommendation to the committee and ultimately to the board on where we should start first or second. And we believe that before we jump on another elementary school beyond Lake, we do need to go and do this work and be prepared to ensure that we have the facilities necessary to support all of our TK and preschool.
Wanted to share
That I'll
this.
transition to the boss.
I wanted to share, thank you so much, Dr. Wold. I wanted to transition to these next 3 slides just to share with you that the district is getting ready to undergo significant change, redesign, reform because of the strategic planning and visioning process. If you can go to the next slide. This will not just apply to the top schools that the board is going to give us guidance and direction on, but this applies to every single school. And I've talked to the board about this individually, and I've talked to all members of the organization about this as well, that I am going to be recommending for the next board meeting on the 23rd that we have an outside entity come in pending board approval, and that they will engage in an analysis of our district where they look at every item, every department, all of our policies, procedures, looking at our finance department, our HR department, operations, and even going down to the school level where we're looking at things such as suspensions, expulsions, and attendance rates, how we master schedule our kids in the classes, and whether our kids, all of our kids, have access to the rigor and to curriculum as well. And what's going to happen across the entire organization is every school building, every department is going to engage in this conversation about our vision. So the conversation will be for all of our schools, where we want to be in the next 5 to 10 years. And we want to see a snapshot of where we want to be. And part of that will be then developing a facilities master plan and redesign of all of our schools to match our vision. That's really important. And I don't want anyone to underestimate the importance of having that vision and conversation, because that's going to really drive our direction. This is not a conversation that's just for our teachers or our leaders, but this is a community conversation where external and internal stakeholders are involved in where we want our students to be in the next 5 to 10 years. And again, I just want to reiterate that that's going to drive even what our facilities will look like. Vision drives that conversation. So I wanted to be very clear about that. So even as the board has given us direction, one of the things that we want to be very clear about, whatever schools we're going to focus on, every school is going to have this conversation about our next steps and our future. Mission, we have a mission statement. There is going to be a refresh of our mission as well. And then also, we do have a graduate profile, and I've seen the graduate profile, but we are going to engage in a conversation as a community. Are these the skills that we still want our students to know and be able to do when they graduate? What are our business partners saying? What are our parents saying as well? So we wanted to be very clear that all of these conversations play into the facilities master plan and the redesign process that we're going to go through with all of our schools, that they are situated and suited to make sure that we're headed in the right direction, our vision. Core values, this outside entity is going to have the conversation about the core values as well. That's how we treat one another, how we interact with one another, and how we behave, how we talk to one another as well. This organization also will help us to establish 2 to 3 priority goals. We know that we are a district that has significant challenges. We won't be able to do everything at once. So we will, as a learning community, we will decide what are the 2 to 3 goals that we're going to pursue together. And then we'll come up with strategies. There'll be a compelling scorecard, or a district-wide scorecard. That scorecard will be shared with internal and external stakeholders on how we are progressing on our indicators and on our goals as well. So there will be a high sense of accountability. And again, I felt it was really important to put these slides in here, because this is going to drive the facilities master plan and the redesign of not just the schools that the board's going to share with us to focus on, but all of our schools within the district. Next slide. There is a timeline for this to happen. And actually, the date should be the 24th of June, not the 15th, because this is all pending board approval. So from the 24th to the August 31st, we'll start getting things in place for this organization to come in and to do this work, the equity analysis, and then the strategic planning process, and supporting me and my leadership. And then you see also July the 1st through October the 1st, we'll be working on a summary that will go to the board and to the public. And then also from November to January, the 2022, we'll engage together in that redesign process of our schools and to be part of the strategic planning process. And again, every school will have this conversation about, are we set up and even structurally to make sure we're fulfilling our mission and our vision. And then that organization will continue to be here to the end of the year. So I thought this was important to share with everyone, because it ties right into the facilities master planning process. Thank you so much.
All right, so bringing those pieces back together, the staff recommendation is for the board to adopt the updated priority list, understanding that we have these next steps still involved in the process. So this was only one piece of the facility master plan. We still have the district-wide initiatives of air quality and thermal comfort, as well as technology. We still have the student housing study, which really is affected greatly by what Dr. Wold was referring to earlier with the changes, the potential changes in preschool and TK. And so as we feel all of these different components, as well as with the student housing, what's happening at the El Cerrito corridor, our underutilized sites, all of these pieces need to come together into an options development piece that reflects the vision of the district as it gets redefined and moves forward, along with the implementation plan. So what we're asking for the immediate next steps is to initiate site master planning process for Kennedy and Richmond to develop project scoping and budget estimates to coordinate with the mission vision refresh and the student housing study. So we will need to come back to the board with a specific budget for this initiative, but we would like to start the process of hiring the architects to be able to complete that. Then beyond that, looking to approve an increase in scope and budget for Kennedy High School field replacement with the bleachers project, which is currently in a schematic design. That was a maintenance project, and then complete the district-wide student housing analysis with emphasis on the elementary school changes. So those are our immediate next steps, pending board adoption of the priority list.
And then I'll just tie in, if we move forward with that focus on the Kennedy project and getting the architects, we would also sell the first series of bonds so that we're teed up to be able to do the full projects as we get those architectural renderings set up. So everything kind of connects together as we move forward. And we know that we can start on the high schools while we do the other pieces.
That concludes our presentation.
Mr. Christian, do you have any questions, sir?
No questions, but make some comments later.
Got it. I do have some questions, and folks out there who have comments that they want to make. After my questions, we're going to go to public comment. So I'm just teeing you up so you can raise your hands if you want to make public comment. So I have some questions about 3 schools, and you touched on them, but they're Cameron, Alvarado, and Sarah. Why, again, were those schools not included in the 2016 ranking?
So back in 2016, we had 3 metrics that were Lcap. So again, that percent of low-income foster youth and English language learners, as well as the capacity utilization and whether they were eligible for state funding. That couldn't be equally applied to specialty programs as it would be to a comprehensive school. So without 3 of the metrics being able to be equally distributed, it was hard for the numbers to work out. And so they were pulled aside into a separate list, which left them floating in
just really
ambiguity.
quickly, it was LCAP. What were the other 2?
Capacity utilization and state eligibility for state funding through the facility state match grants.
I'm sorry, I interrupted. I was trying to take my notes.
So, but that was it. That was the reason they were separated out previously.
Okay, so what has changed with LCAP? So how are you able to apply that metric evenly to these 3 schools?
So the adult program that's at Alvarado does take information in on their students. So we used the adult school data. They don't fill out the free and reduced form the same way, but the majority of the students that we counted there were English language learners, which were the type of program that they signed up for. So it was not the same state designation, but that's why they're there. So we used, it was a self-identification that's part of the enrollment process to get into the adult school. So that's how we used, or that's how we calculated Alvarado.
Okay, before we move on
Yeah.
from Alvarado, the students that you're talking about, are you talking about grown people?
Yes, they're adults. It's an adult education program.
Okay, so there is no LCAP for grown people, right?
No, there is not.
Okay, so
It's just the adult ed metrics.
Dr. Wall, the metrics that were approved for you guys to use was LCAP. This is a lot of money. I don't want to have any conversation about massaging things, okay? The metric that you guys are supposed to use was the LCAP, correct?
Yes.
That only applies to children, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the LCAP does not actually apply to any of the adult, we're on Alvarado, I'm gonna stick with them. The LCAP doesn't apply to Alvarado because you took, what you really did is you took the metric that really only applies to kids and tried to see how it works for adults. Is that right? I see Mr. Apri shaking his head, yes.
They are English language learners. So
I'm not saying they're
comparable,
not.
but
What I'm saying is the metric was for children, correct?
I understand.
But is that correct?
LCAP only apply, the unduplicated count only applies to K-12.
Okay, so
I do need to point out, when you did the LCAP is actually a metric of the demographics of the population served. We do receive funding and have an obligation to serve both adults and preschool students. In the previous metrics, it was an oversight not to recognize that we have an obligation with our facilities to look at all individuals that we provide service for. They never should have been taken out of the metric, and it's the responsibility as an agency
Dr.
to
Wold,
use demographics.
Dr. Wold, I just want to be very clear. Metrics were passed, and the metrics that were passed have to do with children, not adults. So we're going, so I don't, I'm, thank you. So I want to move on to Sarah. Explain to me how, and I think I know the answer to this, but explain to me how the LCAP, LCFF issue, how that applies to Sarah, which is also an adult school.
Well, so Sarah is currently operating as our West County Mandarin School, or
Correct.
County Mandarin School. No, it is West County. Anyways, so I use the LCAP qualifications of that program.
Okay, so isn't it true that the Mandarin school was only housed there temporarily?
Correct.
And isn't it true that the Mandarin school is not even going to be at Sarah in like 2 months?
Also correct.
Okay, so what we would be doing is, because there was a program with kids there housed temporarily, and those kids are not going to be there anymore, we would basically be, okay, so without the Mandarin school, that criteria doesn't really apply to Sarah either, for the same reason with Alvarado. Is that correct, Mr. Freeze?
That's correct.
Okay. So let's go now to Cameron. What's Cameron?
Cameron is our special education school for early childhood development.
Okay, so Cameron is a preschool.
Yes.
Okay.
That only serves our special education students for pull-out programs.
Okay. How many kids go to Cameron?
I do not have that data in front of me, although if I recall direct from 2016, it was approximately 100 students, but they don't attend at the same time.
Okay. So Cameron has approximately 100 students.
And I really need to double check that.
Well,
But
that's what I'm saying, approximately.
okay,
So Cameron has approximately 100 students, and Cameron is a preschool, correct?
yes.
Okay. How does Lcap apply to preschools?
So the difficulty is how we achieve our LCAP numbers is by filling out free and reduced lunch forms. But we don't do that for our preschool students per se, because they're not actually receiving lunch services at Cameron since it's a pull-out program.
Okay. I'm not trying to be a butt. I'm not trying to be a butt. And some of these things I didn't talk to you guys before. And some of these questions that I'm asking, I know the answer already. But you know, instead of just me waiting until the discussion and saying it all, and people saying I'm making it up, that's why I'm asking you to answer the question. So this is another school. The criteria that you were given to follow was something that is very specific to K-12. And so this is another example of where the criteria actually doesn't fit, because this is a preschool. This is not K-12. This is not LCFF. This is not LCAP. And so okay, so that criteria doesn't fit for any of those schools. Let me go to the next. Let me ask you another question. When I looked at the seismic weight,
Yes.
I don't see anything for Cameron. Can you help me with that?
So, and I apologize, I was going to, seismic is another one that did not necessarily apply, although, so not all schools, when the seismic program was introduced in 2002, not all schools were reviewed. So we have additional schools that are on this list that have no report, and you'll see that in the metric of no report. And that was applied because the type of structures that those were built, they didn't necessarily warrant the process of going through to be able to make a report for them. So they were given no points for this particular requirement, just like the other schools that are in this list that had no report.
Okay, so I want to stick with these same three schools for a moment: Cameron, Alvarado, Sarah. The LCAP criteria, excuse me, the LCAP criteria that doesn't apply. And then seismic, for those three schools, none of those three schools have seismic on them. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so there are at least three criteria. In 2016, they were left off because there were three criteria that didn't apply neatly. I'm just going to say neatly to be nice, but didn't apply to those schools. But in 2020, while we're doing this, there are at least two criteria that still don't apply, and those are the LCAP criteria and the seismic criteria. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay.
However, it was four. I misspoke earlier because
Okay.
the seismic one also didn't apply.
Oh, okay. And then for state funding, how does that apply to them?
So state funding did not carry over. So that one was not determined by the prioritization committee this year to want to be included.
Okay. So LCAP, capacity, and what was the other one?
Sorry.
Seismic.
Yes.
Okay, so LCAP still doesn't apply to those three. Seismic still doesn't apply to those three. Talk to me about capacity.
So
Does
capacity,
it apply to those three?
Not in the same way, but it is currently not a criteria in 2020. That was also removed.
Okay, so capacity still doesn't apply, but like eligibility for state funding, they were both removed. So they don't really come into play in this matrix, right?
Correct.
Okay, so Lcap and seismic. So only two of the four kind of remain then, is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Okay, and the ones that remain still don't apply to these three, right?
Correct. Although we tried to apply the spirit of the criteria, totally understanding that that did not exactly match what the board passed.
Is there any other criteria that you tried to apply the spirit to, but wasn't what we actually passed?
No.
Just those.
Which I did point out, full disclosure.
You did. I'm not, hey, look, if you didn't tell me, we wouldn't be talking about it. So I'm not mad. I just want to be clear. And I think the whole board is watching. So I want everybody to be clear.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's why it says draft, right?
Yeah. So those were the three questions or the schools that I had questions about. And with that, what we're going to do is we're going to move to public comment. And so there's only one hand up right now, but I know that this is a big issue. So, I want to give people a chance to raise their hand if they haven't. So going once, going twice, 2.5, 3, get it while it's hot, 3, gone. Mr. Daly on his last.
As we transition to public comment, we just wanted to share that Cameron's enrollment is currently 305.
All right, so the first hand is not a full name. So Wilkie, you may unmute.
Yeah, hi, my name is Mr. Wilkie. I'm the music director at Richmond High School. I've been here for 7 years. So a couple of things, I'm gonna try and go quick since I have no time to speak. This building that I'm sitting in was not built in the 1970s. This building was opened in 1955. I've seen it in the yearbooks. I've talked to former teachers here. This building has consumed many hours and much of my energy throughout my 7 years working here, getting this district and the facilities folks to get it up to legal code to even be used. Until a year and a half ago, I didn't have light switches in here. Until a year or two ago, before COVID, there was a biohazard in my ceiling here, and I've had multiple plumbing issues in this building because it was built in 1954. My program has grown huge. I don't have space for storage of any of my 3 massive inventories of band instruments, orchestra instruments, and band uniforms. I also have a music production class, which has no space to exist. These are full programs with kids who want to do them. I had 50 kids here today in the summer doing music. This facility is great, but it's worn out. Measure R was passed on the backs of Richmond High students. Please, I'm shocked that size is not considered in your criteria and the amount of people served, because those are the people paying for it. So it's kind of crazy that the size, when we're 1,600 versus a high school that's half the size, that's not a criteria. I have a list of 8 more things, but as always, here we are. So thank you for your time. This is an old building. No one seems to know about it. I really don't know how.
Please conclude your comments.
Yeah, please, yeah, thank you.
Mr. Gosney, you're able to unmute.
Thank you very much. I'm concerned when I look at this list at some of the schools where the full set of criteria was not able to be applied because it's apples and kumquats. The Lcap is a good example. With the adult schools, you can't really use that as a criteria for most of the schools and exclude it for those schools because it doesn't apply. This is important because the ranking of the schools is going to determine who gets a Measure R money and who gets left out for the next decade or two. And as on the prioritization committee, I know that at least twice I brought up the need we've got to give a permanent location for the Mandarin school so it can be properly ranked by itself in here. And right now I'm saying that seeing that the school that it's sitting at right now, but will not be sitting at in 2 months from now, is ranked on there. based on the information about the Mandarin school being there now. That's not right. I think that the list needs to be sent back and retooled to be tweaked properly to accurately reflect the information that that should be used under the criteria. Thank you.
And Mr. De Leon, you should be able to mute.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm glad to see that Richmond has moved up on the ranking. The suggestion I would like to make to the board is the high schools actually service students at the end of their K-12 career, and that there should be a great prioritization to possibly consider rebuilding both high schools at the same time. The need is there. A new school revitalizes the community. I saw that at Helms when Helms opened in the new building within the first 2 years. At the time we had API scores. The scores jumped by over 100 points in that short time. Honoring the students, it's always important, and the students did a lot of the work for Measured R. Also, I think the students will also appreciate classrooms where you don't hear the class next to you because the walls do not go all the way up. We want to really honor our students and look for an equity-based facilities to support the academic needs of the students. Thank you.
That concludes public comment.
Mr. Phillips, you're muted.
I said a million things and nobody heard. So I'll say them again. So we're gonna have comments. Christian, I know you have comments. After you make your comments, then I'm gonna go, and then I'm gonna ask to share my screen. So Christian, you can see. Well, everybody will see it, but I'm gonna ask to share my screen so everybody can see what I'm looking at. And then I want to make some comments and ask for a motion. So, Mr. Christian, I'm going to let you go and make your comments.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. I just want to first start off by saying the presentation that Dr. Hurst mentioned with the vision and the mission of how we should be vision and mission driven and making sure that we bring all of our schools up to a good high standard, that every school is done right. I want to say is that early today, I just had a chance to walk through the Kennedy site, and also behind Kennedy, which is Caliver. And I was looking at Caliver and looking at Kennedy. It's night and day. On one side it's dirty, on the other side it's clean. And I took pictures and I video shot a lot of the stuff over the area. And that's like, wow. And then the teacher got out there yesterday and got a weed whacker and started whacking the weeds out there on Kennedy's ground. I said, my goodness. I said, if you would have let me know, I would have joined you. I would have got out there and put my clothes, dirty clothes on and wet weeds too. Just to say is that we have to take pride in all of our facilities to make sure that all of our kids are feeling good about who they are on our school sites. When you have a clean house, a clean yard, you feel good. And we have to make sure that we do good housekeeping on our sites. And so, like DeLeon, the principal at Richmond High, is right to see both of our schools rebuilt, and that our kids can feel good about their sites. So it's just a lot that's needs to happen. But if we take care of all of our sites and take care of all of our schools, making sure we put our love into what we do, things would come out the way they're supposed to. So, like I said earlier today, when I was at Kennedy, I took pictures and videos, and it's not cool. So, thank you.
Again, stop talking to myself. Mr. Christian, thank you very much for your comments. Based on what you said and the questions that I asked earlier and the answers that we received, I would like to um, share my screen if I could get the privilege to share my screen.
I believe you should be able to.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, so what I did, so it would be easier for me to track this, and you guys could take a screenshot of it, or I can email it to you. So what we have on the far left hand side, that's the list of 2016, and I double checked the orders or whatever, so I believe that they're right, but that's 2016, and then in the middle next to it, that is what you guys proposed after you did your criteria. Um, then what is to the right, this is what I'm going to ask a motion for to be the recommendation from the facilities committee to the full board. And then I'm just going to explain very briefly how it's different from the one in the middle. Okay. So the yellow is really where it's different. So what I'm proposing and what I'm going to ask for a motion for is that essentially Stige, instead of it being first, that it moves down to third. And there's a lot of there are a lot of issues around Kennedy and Richmond. Um, and I think it's easier because they fell that the way that they fell is to just leave Kennedy where it is and leave Richmond second because that's just literally how it fell. So it's not really a reason to change them. But if we can actually do them at the same time, and I think we can because you could have more than one project going, that they be done at the same time. But I know that there needs to be a rank. So Kennedy, Richmond, Stige. Then what happens is Cameron, Alvarado, Sarah, the three that are in the red. What I'm proposing that we do is we move them back where they were from 2016. So if you look at 2016, if you look at the facilities master plan, that's the order. And then it's separated. There was like a little part under it, like almost like another spreadsheet. It was only 3 lines long, but it's in that order: Cameron, Alvarado, Sarah. And I recommend that we put them back where they were. And so you see them in the middle in red, and you see them in what I'm proposing in yellow at the bottom, because it puts them back. And I want to put them back for the reasons that we just talked about in this meeting, but I also want to put them back for another reason. And I understand what staff did. So when I say this, please know that I'm not being critical of you all. you guys got some criteria and tried to figure out how to apply them to every single school, right? Even if it didn't fit, you tried, you know. I get it. So, but you tried and you did. And, but philosophically as well, in addition to what we discussed earlier, I think there's a philosophical issue with moving adult schools up the list in front of K-12 schools that need to be done. Um, I think that's philosophically wrong, that we should be focusing on our children. Not that adult schools are not important, but that the children should come first. And also, I don't believe that anybody voted for Measure R, to be frank, to rebuild Alvarado or to rebuild Sarah. And if you know, I'm a parent, right? And like if these adult schools got built before like my kids' school, like I would be livid. And like I think other parents would be too, and community members would be too, and I don't blame them. So for all of those reasons, I would like us to move those three back where they were. The middle, where it's blank in the third column, that's the exact same order that you guys are recommending. So because the order only changes because I pull Cameron, Alvarado, and Sarah out. And so essentially when I pulled those out, everybody just moved up into the space that they would have been in. So the changes really, again, only are the yellows, which would have Kennedy, Richmond, Steege, Highland is where you guys have it, right? And then the first real change after that is Grant moves up because we're pulling those other ones out. So I'm asking Trustee Christian for, I'm gonna write here, recommendation. And so the board, the whole board is watching right now, but I'm gonna write here, recommendation. And I would like this third column to be the recommendation that we send Trustee Christian to the board. And they could get the whole thing, right? So they'll see what, you know, how the matrix came out after staff did it, and they could see the 2016. They could see the whole thing. So it's not like hiding it. They see it right now. But Trustee Christian, this third column where it says recommendation, can I have a motion to recommend that third column to the full board?
Move.
Okay, so it's been moved. I'm not gonna second it because I asked for the motion. It's a little, you know what? I'm gonna second it just in case. So I'm gonna second it even though it's just me and you. All right. So on the question, Mr. Christian, vote.
Yes.
Phillips, yes. So the recommendation that's coming from here is the third column, but of course, everybody can see all three columns, but it'll go to the full board for the final decision. Thank you very much, everybody. And then that's it. And then there's something else I'll talk about. Well, I'm not going to talk about offline because then people are going to be like, what is he talking about offline after we just did this? So in your presentation, you had two things. You had this, which was really the item, but then you had said something about next steps, like approving the architect and all that stuff. I believe those are contracts. So if there are contracts that have to come back, please just bring them back, so we can do whatever we need to do, you know, to the board or wherever you're going to bring them, you know, bring them. But I just wanted to make sure that we are not approving anything today other than what we are recommending, anything today other than this right here.
We understand.
But to
Okay.
give clarity, what you would be doing, once you adopt this at the board level, you'd be giving a recommendation to us to issue the RFP for architectural, which starts us down the process. We would begin the funding and getting all that set up as well, knowing that the direction is to potentially be ready to do 2 high schools in a quicker time frame. We will be notifying, the board's already approved selling Measure R, but we said we would come back and talk to them before we did
Well,
that.
Dr. Walt, what we're going to do, because we were really going to try to leave here on time, is we're going to go to C3, and we could talk offline, and you could fill that part in. And I appreciate everything, and I'm not trying to stop your flow. I'm just trying to get us out of here. So C3 is Citizens Bond Oversight Committee policy discussion, and the presentation on that is Mr. Freeze. Also, there was a letter that was sent by Mr. Anderson, who's the chair of the CBOC. You guys got that, right? Okay, so when we get to the question part, I will raise the letter. So we'll have some kind of discussion about it. But Mr. Freeze, begin your presentation, please.
So the CBOC policy that was brought back, so originally this was taken to the board for discussion. It was redirected back to the facility committee. So what we have before us is the revised CBOC policy and the board resolution to dissolve the current CBOC and to establish a new Measure R CBOC. And again, I think what we wanted to hear is discussion from the public on this item.
And so the big piece on this is there's been a lot of conversation about whether or not when the board passed the resolution to merge the previous Measure D and E CBOC with Measure R, did that start the clock over again? There's been legal opinion from members of the CBOC that yes, it did. We checked with
Dr. Wold, I don't want to have any conversation about potential litigation. So we are right now. We're starting to talk about legal opinions. Please don't. This is being recorded. People are watching. Please do not comment on anything that lawyers said.
So the district has created a new CBOC, and the proposal is to amend the board policy to align with the current ed code and law for the CBOC, and then allow for the board to appoint members based on those positions. So we can go through the whole thing, but it's basically the main components of it are that the board appoints the members, they represent the 7 required seats, and each can serve up to 3 terms. The big change would be you have to sit out 1 year before you can come back after doing 3 consecutive terms. Whereas currently, once you term out, there is no way to come back.
Does that conclude the presentation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Christian, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Okay. Trying to think of the best way to do this. Mr. Anderson's letter, I can read it and ask questions as I read, but it might be easier if people are able to see the letter. So they're not trying to remember everything I said. I could share my screen, or somebody else can maybe share their screen.
If you have it up, it would probably be faster and easier if you could share your screen with this item.
Okay. I do have it up. Okay, I will share. And just so people hear Mr. Anderson was invited, but he had a conflict, so he was not able to physically be here, which is why he sent a letter. Okay, here's Mr. Anderson's letter. And I'm just going to read it. And then as we get to different spaces in it, I'm just going to ask staff as my questions, if you guys can make a comment, okay? Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm going to start mid-page. As requested last night by Mr. Phillips, I have identified specific sections in the proposed policy that resulted in CBOC Resolution 21-1 of June 14, 2021. Also attached is a detailed markup that was used in understanding the proposed revision. It contains proposed changes and comments. The bulleted items are fatal flaws relative to the loss of independence of the WCCUSD CBOC. Bullet 1. Major point is independence of promise to the voters in Prop 39 bond measures, references an independent CBOC, and strict citizen oversight as required by California Education Code Section 15278, 15280, and 15282. The policy provides no inclusion of the phrase Independent Citizens Oversight Committee. Staff, do you have a response to that?
Well, the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee 15278 does speak to the CBOC as being independent, but it does not define the word independence. And nowhere in the statute is there a definition of independence defined.
And the creation of a CBOC is done by the Board of Education through resolution, upon which they appoint members who then meet without the board's presence. So that by itself is an independent meeting, and then provide their annual report to the board per statute.
Okay, so you believe that because they will be meeting independently of the full board, or of the board period, that is the independence.
Correct. That's how it's been implemented in other school districts. That was the intent of the legislation.
Okay. Next one starts at the very beginning of the document where the second paragraph paraphrases parts of section 15278 but leaves out the word independent. Comment?
I think all of these on independent are going to have the same answer. It comes down to a question of this is more of a question of control. And again, the board sets the policy of the district, and the board makes the determinations of what projects are going to be done within the parameters of the Measure R or whatever measure language. So I think we can answer each of the independents with that same response.
Okay. Next, the policy is intended to be the bylaws for the CBOC. If the CBOC is an independent committee, it will prepare its own bylaws and operating procedures. Can you talk about that?
Same answer. The board by resolution creates the CBOC. The board creates policy. Board policy is the direction for that committee to meet.
Okay. So just so I understand, and so people who are watching understand as well, you can't really, how do I put this? That's what you said. The board is actually creating it. The state is not creating it. It's us, right?
Correct.
The Ed Code defines the responsibility of the CBOC in 15278.
As
Okay.
well as the required membership.
Okay. And I hit something, so I need to pull this thing back up. Sorry. Okay. Are you guys able to still see the screen, the
Yes.
letter? Okay. As one reads through the document, there are other points where there are numerous issues related to independence. They are noted in the following marked up copy. Okay, so that's the same thing. In section 3.5, there's a phrase, the board has not charged the committee with responsibility for. The California Education Code clearly lists activities of the CBOC on behalf of the citizens. At the very end of paragraph 12578B, it also includes the phrase, but not be limited to. Section 3.5 is in conflict with this section of the Education Code. The CBOC is independent and not a subcommittee or advisory committee. So this issue of who is charging the CBOC, who is charging the CBOC to do this work? Is it the board that's appointing them, or is it Gavin Newsom.
Based on Proposition 39, which is the 55% statute, it requires the Board of Education to commission a CBOC to provide an annual report of whether or not the district has followed the language and direction of the bond with bond proceeds. That committee meets independently and then provides that yearly to the Board of Education. The board creates the committee.
Okay, so this idea that we're not charging them to do this work, that's not true. Is that correct, that it's not true?
Correct. The board is by resolution creating the committee and appointing members to the committee, and those members then provide that annual report back to the board.
Okay. The next one, the major issues relative to independence come in section 5.8b and 6.1, where the CBOC members are prohibited from speaking without the permission of an authorized officer of the district, and the number of meeting. Okay, so let's stop with speaking. What are they talking about that they're prohibited from speaking?
So within there is that if the CBOC has comments, they're to come to the board through the chair. It also says that individual members can speak as individuals in public comment, but it does state that it should come through the chair to bring communication back to the board. So there may be an interpretation that that is a muting device. It's not intended in that way. It's just a protocol when you create bylaws and protocols.
So what you're saying is that the representative, kind of like I'm the board president, what you're saying in this is that the representative of the CBOC, when it comes time to make comments or whatever, is the chair. Is that what you're saying?
That's the way it's written to be, yes.
Okay, and that's the only, is that your only intention?
Yes, it's just because you want to have, not everyone speaks on behalf of an organization. You have the lead of that group provide the common message.
Okay, and then the next one, the number of meetings. Talk, what is going on? Talk to us about that.
So the policy states a minimum of 4 meetings per year. It doesn't prohibit more meetings as needed.
And
okay.
Yes,
Go
there's no
ahead.
minimum or maximum requirement within any code. Technically, you could be compliant with 1 meeting a year. Nobody thinks that's the best pathway. So that's why it started at quarterly with more meetings as necessary based on the programs being implemented.
Okay, so you're just saying that they will meet at least quarterly. That doesn't, at least quarterly, not, that's all you're saying. That they have to meet at least 4 times a month, but you're not saying that it couldn't be more. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. What's the issue with the time?
Which one? I'm
So
sorry.
it says the number of meetings, then it says time. What's the issue with the time? What are they? What's the concern? If you know, if you don't know, that's fine.
Trying to see where it's written.
I would be guessing. So the assumption would be that there's a concern that staff would direct what time they meet that might not be conducive for members. That was not codified in the policy to say it was this time or that time. So
Okay, but staff, meaning like Mr. Freeze, like basically the people in this meeting, you guys have to go to that meeting, correct?
correct.
So what is the issue with you guys having some say about when the meeting is that you guys have to staff? Right, let me ask you the question is, would it, like, for example, would it be appropriate for them to, and I'm not saying they would do that, but like, would it be appropriate for them to be like, you know, we want to meet at 7 o'clock in the morning? and then you guys have to be there at 7 o'clock in the morning because they said they want to be at 7 in the morning, or they said they want to meet at 7 at night. So you guys have to be there at that time because that's what they said. Is that appropriate?
I think there's a reasonable time to meet, and I believe it would be a discussion item, but ultimately decided what schedule works best for the members. Since they are members of the public, it would be appropriate for them to meet in the afternoons or early evenings.
No, well, no, I'm assuming that the meetings would be at a reasonable time. I think guess what I'm trying to say is, does it not make sense to you that you guys would have some kind of input as into when the meetings are, because you have to be there and this is not your only responsibility?
Yes, the
Yes,
policy actually states that staff works with the chair to identify the agenda items, just as staff works with board members to do the board agendas or committee meetings. Staff is, in all meetings in this district, responsible for the creation of the agendas.
Okay, all right, so you just talked about the agenda part. We talked about the time, and I'm going through this. We're still in that same bullet. The next one is communication to the public and board are controlled by the same authorized officer. Help me understand that.
Same concept as now. The board communication goes through the superintendent. In other committees, they go through the staff member assigned to that committee. There's always a protocol for communication going in and out, and this policy just has an officer or designee of the superintendent responsible for that work and that coordination.
Okay, so it's not like, so if they give a report, which they do, they give reports. So if they give a report, all you're saying is that the designated person, the superintendent, is going to be responsible for making sure that that gets out. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay. Doesn't Prop 39 actually say that we're responsible for getting this stuff out ultimately? Or something like that?
We have a responsibility to make it available to the public, yes, and that it's available, that the annual report is accessible on our website.
And when you say we have a responsibility to make sure it gets out, you're actually talking about staff, right?
The staff, as in, yes, the staff and district, yes.
Not the CBOC, right?
The CBOC has their defined responsibilities for the annual report and release of the annual report.
Right. So I promise I'm not trying to play. You guys don't have to be nervous, and I can't see your faces right now. So if you're looking at the expression on my face, or if I'm leaning in, I can't even see you. So I just want to let you know, don't like try to pick up on my body language or anything like that right now. Because there's nothing underlying here, and there's no curveballs or fastballs coming or anything like that. So I understand that the CBOC has a responsibility to do its report. I understand that. But I am saying, once that report is done, is it accurate that the statute requires the district, which would be staff, the folks who are in here right now, superintendent, you guys, the communications department, it requires you guys to make this accessible to the public, right? That's what the statute says. So that's your job, is that true?
Yes, correct. Just like maintaining board agendas and other agendas in an accessible format for the public, that remains staff's responsibility.
Okay. All right. And then the next one, the oversight committee is controlled by the entity that is being overseen. That goes back to the independent stuff that you were talking about, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. Because they can't even exist unless we actually appoint them, right?
That's correct.
Okay. The next one, another concern relative to independence in section 5.5 regarding review and appointment of CBOC members. the authorized officer reviews applicants and makes recommendations to the board. What is the issue? I mean, I
So
personally have an issue with it. I think that the facilities committee should be, but what is this issue that they're talking about?
This follows the same protocol we're actually using with a similar committee, which is the 7-11 committee. They submit
Okay.
their applications to the superintendent / designee. They
Okay.
then will filter those and bring those forward to the board for
Okay.
approval. So
Okay.
we're just a collection agency.
Okay. Okay. And then the next bullet, another concern relative to independence, section 5.5 regarding review and appointment of, wait, that's what I just did. Okay. And then he has something in here about the grand jury. Which, okay. Okay, so we went through their whole letter. And you guys have responded and answered the questions. And I got a chance to talk very briefly to Mr. Anderson last night. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can see everybody again. I don't have any questions, any more questions. That was a lot of questions. I don't have any more questions. So we're going to go to public comment. And there's one hand up right now. If other people want to comment, then please raise your hand. Okay, there's one hand. Please let them go.
All right, Mr. Gosney, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you. Everything about these proposals goes against what this community demands. Everything about it is wrong. This is not a board policy. It's a staff policy. It was drafted by staff without consultation with the board or the stakeholders, the CBOC stakeholders, past and present. You also have to look at the timing for this and ask if it passes the smell test. This was put on the board agenda just a day and a half after the CBOC chair, me, was termed out. And the CBOC was the smallest that it has ever been and populated mostly by relatively new recruits that are still trying to learn the ropes. The public, the CBOC, and even the board didn't find out about this until late on the Friday, right before a 3-day holiday weekend, when many of the people that might weigh in were unavailable. And even right after the holiday, you all had 2 special meetings in a row. Still not the best time to reach out to discuss the issues. When agendas for Wednesday meetings are posted, they're usually posted on Friday afternoon. The agenda for this meeting was posted late on a Sunday afternoon, once again, stifling our ability to network and lobby the right people. Prop 39 requires community oversight of the bond program, and this community has set standards for what they expect. This board needs to stand firm and do this right. We have a set of board policies that were negotiated over a 2.5-year period where the governance committee, senior staff, including Superintendent Duffy, and the CBOC could live with. This should be the starting point where members of the board and stakeholders, which include the CBOC and senior termed out CBOCers, can work out something to present to staff, which would include the new superintendent before him being brought before the board and the public for public review. A 90-second set of comments on something this complex is an insult to this community.
That concludes public comment.
Thank you very much. Mr. Christian, do you have any comments?
No comments.
Okay. I have just some very brief comments. I want to give some context for no, I don't want to. No, I don't. What I'm going to do is because this is complex, and I need to really personally kind of sit and think about it. I am going to send you all, staff, some of my thoughts around this, like suggestions, and bring this back instead of us actually going. It's 4:35, and me trying to figure out how to do whatever sitting in this meeting. But so that's what I'm going to do. You know, and pull out some track changes or whatever and make some suggestions. We'll bring it back and we'll talk about it. And then, we'll send a recommendation to the board. But I do want to say that I appreciate all of the time that people have spent volunteering on the CBOC, but need to slow down. We're to slow down. I appreciate all the time, Ms. Resendez. It actually helps to be able to see your face in the camera because it's a cue to me to slow down. Yeah, I will just send my suggestions and we'll bring it back and have a conversation about it. But I wanted to be very clear that Mr. Anderson did send in a letter. As far as I'm concerned, Mr. Anderson is the chair of the CBOC. He's the representative of the CBOC. So, if there is a meeting or a phone call like the one I had last night, it will be with Mr. Anderson because he is the chair. If it's not a full meeting, like everybody's, he's the chair. So, like past CBOC people who have opinions, while those opinions are greatly appreciated, for anybody, if you're not on the CBOC, please do not think that you are going to be sitting down and hashing out what this policy is, because you're not. No more than if I was no longer on the board would I show up and presume that I have the ability to try to sit down and hash something out. That's not how things work. That's not decently and in order. So it's 4:37. We go to the next item. We're gonna leave here. I'm telling you, we're gonna leave.
So I'm sorry, the next item is informational items only. So we have the monthly suite of reports for your perusal.
And we have the 7-Eleven committee membership recruitment flyer also included in the packet, and we'd be happy to present or take any questions, or if you just wanted to receive it as informational, that would complete our agenda for today.
So I would like President Phillips just to make a pitch for the 7-Eleven committee. We have many underutilized properties. The committee is 7 members, no more than 11.
Well, hold on. Before we go to 7-Eleven, because we do have, so this is kind of like your report, like the superintendent's report, where you're just kind of throwing a bunch of things in there at once and talking about all of them.
So I would love to present the financial reports if I could, and since
that's what I'm saying. Go, do your thing, go.
I thank you for the opportunity. So there is a suite of 6 reports that we produce for the bond program every month. And so I'll take you through a quick navigational guide, leaving a few minutes for the 7-Eleven committee at the end. But you can see here we are in the month of June, and so we're presenting the report as of the end of May. So the first report is the Consolidated Budget Status Report, and when we present financial reports for the bond program, we're presenting for the totality of the program, and so it goes back essentially to fiscal year 0. And so this report provides additional details across all of our sites. If you're looking for what is current, you can look to the items that have an asterisk, because those are currently our active projects. We do have a designation of legacy project that is used for projects that essentially had commenced prior to 2016. In 2016, we adopted the 2016 Facilities Master Plan, which was essentially somewhat of a reset of the program because we did have a failed bond measure and we only had so many dollars remaining. And so a lot of community members are specifically tracking the implementation of the 2016 Facilities Master Plan. So as a carve out of the first report, we have a report that looks very similar, but provides a lot of additional information, but only for the projects pursuant to the 2016 Facilities Master Plan. So all of this information is in the larger overall report, but if you just wanted to focus on the 2016 Facility Master Plan projects and forward, you could go to this report to get that same information, just specifically focused on the Facilities Master Plan. And so what you'll notice when you see this report is there's a lot more information about the budget management and the commitments that you can find here. One of the things that we really pride ourselves on in our reports is kind of the understanding that a lot of this information, because we're looking over such a long period of time, historically things change. And so we have added a series of footnotes to try to help provide additional information as it relates to the report and questions. Essentially, as we receive questions about our financial reports, we've been incorporating footnotes such that that information always exists and is available to anyone who may end up with a similar question when looking at the information. For example, the 2016 Facilities Master Plan here under Note 10 had a project budget for Hercules Middle School and a separate budget for Hercules High School. But since the scope of the project was for a singular project, we put those two board-approved budgets together and we're reporting them as one budget because they correspond to one project that would serve both the middle school and the high school site. And so we made that note here because if someone was looking at the 2016 Facilities Master Plan and trying to connect it to this report, they may have that question if they didn't already have that information. The third report is what we affectionately call Report 13. This is a report that really came out of a partnership with the CBOC and them helping us understand kind of specifically what they wanted to see. The way that you can navigate this report is consider the very first page as your cover sheet. So along the right-hand side, there's a series of notes. And if you follow these notes, they'll carry you through the additional pages of the report, providing more information. For example, the state facility grants pending state approval. So we anticipate that we could potentially receive, and we have applied for, another $12.3 million in state facility grant dollars that just extend our dollars forward. So if you really wanted to know more about that, you would go to Note 4 in the report. And so you can see here, following, here's Note 4. It's about the state facility grants, and it provides you the backup information that's associated with that single line item that's on the cover sheet. So you can always see the backup documentation that supports the numbers that you find on the cover. Because Report 13 has become kind of a staple in our suite of reports, and through a recommendation that we also received from a community member, what we have here is our variance report. So if you wanted to see, it's been a month since we got to look at these reports, what actually changed? What is the variance from a month ago to now? You could quickly just jump to this report and you would see we had a burn rate in the month of May of 1.5 million. And so these items follow along with the single line items that you see on the cover of Report 13. You could very simply see here, did the board approve a change in a budget? How many dollars did we spend in the bond program? In addition to this suite of monthly reports that we produce, we also produce an annual variance report. So then again, on a single sheet of paper at the end of the year, you would be able to see the variance across that year if you wanted to see the transactional history in a snapshot. The next report, and I promise we're almost done, save the best for last. This is what we call Report 2. It is aesthetically and functionally the same as what we call our site budget authorization form. So we follow this format whenever we come forward to the board asking for the board to either approve a recommendation to increase or decrease a project budget. The challenge when we created this format in 2016 was we wanted to have a summary across all of our sites on a single sheet of paper. We translated that interpretation into a single two-sided sheet, but technically you can fit it all on a sheet of paper. So what you would see here is you would see each one of our sites organized by elementary, then middle, then high school, etc. You would see original budget, the last board approved budget date, which for us was the April 14th meeting. The expenditures, as you can see here from fiscal year 1 through the previous fiscal year. Then this column here is going to identify for you all of the expenditures within our active fiscal year. And so currently this represents from July 1 to the end of May, which is our current fiscal year of fiscal year 21. And then you'll see some additional details related to the total expenditure. If you want to look at previous fiscal years and current fiscal year, our commitment balance and our budget balance. Again, we have a series of footnotes because sometimes it can be hard to absorb this much information. And so when we get to page 2, you can see it carries on with our high schools, our program sites, and some of our central costs. And then you can see, again, we have here footnotes that help you understand for each one of our sites. Are all of the site projects currently approved, completed? Are they in process, or are they part of the 2016 facilities master plan and moving forward? So our very last report is what we call our AP checklist. And so this is a reconciliation and a line item identification of every single expenditure in the month. Not only do you see very specifically who the vendor is, the check number, date, short account, invoice, amount, and description. These essentially are the checks that we've sent out in the mail for the month of May, expending bond dollars. But on the second page, you see, because sometimes there's additional items that are expenditures that might not be identified specifically in a check that's issued. So you'll find here a summary of the information that's related to retention, which is something very specific to construction projects and part of the requirements of the public contract code. It's how we retain funds whenever we make a payment, such that when we get to the end of the project, we're sure that we have enough dollars should there be work unsatisfactorily performed, a stop notice, etc. Also, we do have some staff members who focus on the bond program. So anyone who has any time charged to the bond program completes a timesheet. And so because payroll hits, there's a reconciliation between the payroll and the timesheet, and that reconciliation is provided here. And so the last page of the report provides you with that reconciled variance between what the payroll was, what the adjustment was based on the timesheet, and then the adjusted amount. And this is part of our implementation of our timekeeping system to make sure that for staff that are dedicated to the bond program, that only our time that's spent on the bond program is charged to the bond program. So for example, Dr. Wold does work from time to time on the bond program, but you will not see his position listed here because none of his time is charged to the bond program. The staff that you see here are the staff that are time carded, and they have specific duties related to the bond program on a daily basis. And with that, I thank you so much for the opportunity. If you want to find some of this in a narrative written form, I will plug the PMP because we have this also in writing, and we hope to produce some videos so that all of this can be as accessible and transparent as possible as we continue our implementation of the program. And that concludes the financial reports.
Thank you so much. And these really are just in the future. These are two different items. And they're very different. They're not, shouldn't really be under one item. So we're gonna, unless Mr. Freeze, you want to do like the superintendent does and do like an associate superintendent's report where you kind of have a gumbo of stuff.
Normally, we would have presented the reports, and it was really a timing issue for this meeting. We thought the
Okay.
agenda was going to go along, and so we concluded them as informational items. But we can agendize them appropriately and go through these reports.
Okay. Okay, but so it is on there, Mr. Freeze, and we're just going to do it together, but just in the future, you know, if it's separate, make it separate, unless you're doing like a report like the superintendent does. So Mr. Freeze or whoever is going to do the 7-Eleven plug.
So
I believe, Dr.
I'll do
Wolf-
that now. I just want to finish up that the amount of financial reports that the district has put together, we went back, the team on the facility side put every expenditure since we started the bonds into a system, Colby, to create these reports. I don't know of a district that's done that. And it really is the most transparent analysis of bond that you'll ever see. So when we do talk about CBOC, one of the great things about working with them is we do have this data going forward. And that's why we're now making a call. We need the best and brightest of our community to join us in the 7-Eleven committee to look at our underutilized properties.
I thought we were the best and the brightest.
We need even more best and brightest. That there are experts out there. I've said it several times. Members of the CBOC are some of the most qualified individuals I've seen as it pertains to facilities. So far, we have 3 applications in. One of them is a former member of the CBOC. We need a minimum of 7 applicants. If we get more, then we'll bring them to the board for selection. These, you can see it's a broad variety of stakeholders that would be able to participate in this analysis of all of our properties. We had a long talk today about non-K-12 sites and whether they are relevant or not. That's part of the 7-Eleven committee's role, is to look at the totality of all district properties and then bring recommendations back through that process to the board for what we may be able to do.
Dr. Wold, thank you. We'll plug that in. Thank you very much, because we're going to leave at 5 and we have not done public comment on this item. Is there any public comment on which would basically be the financial reports or the 7-Eleven committee, because it was under one item. So public, if you have any comments you would like to make about either one, please raise your hand so we can call on you and hear from you. Nobody. Okay, you're
Nobody.
welcome. You're welcome. Going once, going twice. It's out of here. Mr. Christian, do you have any comments on this stuff?
No comments.
I don't have any comments either. So it seems that we are at the end of our meeting. And Mr. Christian, if you'd like to do thank yous, I will thank people for your presentation and thank you for, well, you know what, Mr. Christian, you have a closing remark that you want to make like that?
Yeah, just say no, thank everyone for the presentations, and I'm glad we ending. Okay, thank you.
I too would like to thank you all for the work that you put in, and being able to get us a draft list for the facilities master plan, and being prepared to answer the questions around the weighting, how that happened, right? And being very open and being very, very transparent about the criteria and how they were applied in the spirit or what. I really appreciate that. Got a little Holy Ghost in here. I appreciate it. So thank you. And thank you also for the CBOC policy. We are going to leave with 5 minutes to spare. You all have a good day. And we appreciate you very much for the work that you do, because we know you do a ton of work in this district. Many blessings to everybody. Good night.
Thank you.